My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for 28 years I believed that love meant sacrifice. I thought that being a good daughter meant swallowing my dreams whole, chasing after approval that would never come, and funding a lifestyle I could never afford. I was wrong about everything. Growing up as the middle child in the Mitchell household meant existing in a perpetual state of invisibility. My older brother David was the golden boy, the football star who could do no wrong, while my younger sister Emma was the baby, the artist who needed protection and special attention. I was simply Sarah, reliable Sarah, the one who helped mom with groceries, who remembered dad's doctor appointments, who worked 2 jobs through college to avoid taking out loans while my siblings accumulated debt without a second thought. The pattern established itself early. When David needed money for his fraternity dues, it was my savings account that took the hit. When Emma wanted to attend an expensive art camp, I picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore. When my parents fell behind on their mortgage after dad's failed business venture, I quietly transferred my emergency fund to their account, telling myself it was temporary, that family came first, that this was what love looked like. After graduation, I landed a decent job at a marketing firm in Chicago. Nothing glamorous, but it paid well enough for me to rent a small apartment and start building a life. Or so I thought. Within months, the requests started coming. Dad needed help with the mortgage again. Emma was struggling to make rent in her expensive downtown loft while pursuing her photography career. David had been laid off and needed help with his car payments. Each request came with the same emotional undertones: family loyalty, temporary hardship, the promise that they would pay me back soon. I said yes every time. I told myself I was being generous, that I was blessed to be in a position to help. The truth was, I was terrified of saying no. I was terrified of being seen as selfish, of losing the only role I had ever known in my family. The responsible one, the reliable one, the one who could always be counted on to make things right. Years passed in this pattern. My apartment remained barely furnished because every spare dollar went to my family. I drove a 12-year-old Honda, while David upgraded to a BMW, and Emma bought expensive camera equipment. I ate ramen noodles while funding their restaurant meals and vacation trips. When my coworkers invited me out for drinks, I often declined, claiming I was tired, when the truth was I couldn't afford the luxury of a social life. The sacrifices weren't just financial. When I started dating Mark, a kind accountant who worked in my building, my family's demands intensified. Emma called during our dinner dates, sobbing about her latest crisis. Dad would text me during romantic weekends, asking for urgent financial help. Mom would guilt-trip me if I didn't answer immediately, saying things like, "I guess your new boyfriend is more important than your family." Mark tried to be understanding, but I could see the frustration building. He questioned why a grown woman was supporting her entire family, why my siblings couldn't stand on their own feet, why my parents expected their daughter to fund their lifestyle. I defended them fiercely. I made excuses. I told Mark he didn't understand family loyalty, that he came from privilege and couldn't comprehend what it meant to struggle. The relationship ended after 8 months, with Mark sadly telling me that he couldn't compete with a family that demanded everything and gave nothing in return. I was heartbroken, but I convinced myself he was wrong. Family was forever. Boyfriends came and went. I had made the right choice. The pattern continued through my late 20s. I was promoted twice at work, but my increased salary only meant larger requests from home. When Dad wanted to start another business venture, I co-signed a loan that made my stomach churn. When Emma decided to move to Los Angeles to pursue commercial photography, I paid her moving expenses and first 3 months of rent. When David got married, I contributed more to the wedding than some distant relatives, despite not being asked to be in the wedding party because his fiancée thought I was too plain for the photos. Each sacrifice chipped away at something inside me, but I pushed down the resentment. I told myself I was investing in relationships, that my generosity would be remembered and appreciated. I told myself that someday, when I needed help, they would be there for me. I was building a foundation of love and loyalty that would last forever. I should have recognized the warning signs earlier, like how my achievements were glossed over, while my siblings' minor successes were celebrated with elaborate family dinners I was expected to pay for. Like how I was always the one expected to visit them, never the other way around. Like how conversations about my life were quickly redirected to their problems and needs. Like how my birthday was frequently forgotten, while theirs were major events requiring expensive gifts and celebrations. But I was so deep in the pattern, so invested in my role as the family savior, that I couldn't see what was happening. I had become an ATM with emotions, a problem solver who wasn't allowed to have problems of her own. My identity was so wrapped up in being useful that I had forgotten who I was underneath all the giving. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March, during what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I had just received a promotion to senior account manager, a position I had worked toward for 3 years. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and the opportunity to move to the company's New York office. I was practically floating as I called my parents to share the news. Mom's response was lukewarm congratulations, followed immediately by the real reason for her excitement. "Oh honey, that's wonderful. Now you'll be able to help us with the kitchen renovation we've been planning." Dad chimed in about needing a new roof and how my promotion was a blessing because they had been worried about how to afford it. Emma texted me within an hour, congratulating me and then asking if I could cover her therapy bills now that I was rich. David called that evening to inform me that he and his wife were planning to buy a house and would need help with the down payment. Not one person asked what the promotion meant to me. Not one person asked about my plans, my dreams, my excitement about the opportunity. I had been reduced to a bank account with legs, and for the first time, I could see it clearly. But the real devastation came 3 days later. I had decided to surprise my family by driving home for the weekend to celebrate my promotion in person. I used my key to let myself into my parents' house, calling out to announce my arrival. I heard voices from the kitchen and walked in to find my entire family gathered around the table, including David's wife and Emma's current boyfriend. They were having what was clearly a planned family meeting, complete with coffee and Mom's homemade cookies. The conversation stopped abruptly when they saw me. The silence was deafening. Emma looked guilty. David looked annoyed. My parents exchanged glances that spoke volumes. "What's going on?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. "Oh, sweetheart," Mom said, her voice taking on that saccharine tone she used when she was about to ask for something big. "We were just discussing some family financial planning." "Sit down, honey." I remained standing. "What kind of financial planning?" David cleared his throat, assuming his usual role as the family spokesman. "Look, Sarah, with your new promotion, we think it's time to have a serious conversation about family investment opportunities. We've been talking to a financial advisor about pooling our resources for maximum benefit." "Pooling our resources," I repeated slowly. Emma jumped in, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. "It's so exciting, Sarah. We could all invest in rental properties together. Build generational wealth. The advisor says that with your credit score and income, you could qualify for amazing loan terms." My father spread papers across the table. Loan applications, business plans, property listings, all with my name prominently featured as the primary borrower and financial guarantor. "We've already put deposits down on 3 properties," Mom said, beaming. "The advisor says this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We just need your signature on these loan documents." I stared at the papers, my vision blurring slightly. They had planned this entire venture around my income, my credit, my financial liability. They had made commitments and promises using my future as collateral. And they had done it all without consulting me, without even telling me. "You put down deposits?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't worry," David said quickly. "The properties are in great neighborhoods. We'll all share in the profits proportionally." Proportionally to what? The question hung in the air. Finally, Dad answered, "Well, proportionally to investment capacity. You'll have the largest stake since you're qualified for the loans." "And the largest liability," I said. "That's such a negative way to look at it," Emma said, pouting. "We're trying to build something together as a family." I picked up one of the loan applications. The amount made my stomach drop. Even with my promotion, the monthly payments would consume nearly half my income. I flipped through the other documents. Business plans that made no sense. Profit projections that seemed wildly optimistic. Risk assessments that had been conveniently ignored. "How much of your own money are you each putting in?" I asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. "So let me understand this," I said, my voice growing stronger. "You want me to take out massive loans that I'll be personally responsible for, to buy properties that you've already committed to, for a business venture that you've planned without me, while you contribute nothing but the promise of future profit sharing?" "It's not nothing," David protested. "We'll be handling the day-to-day management. Emma has great ideas for marketing the rentals on social media. I have contacts in the construction industry industry for improvements. And what happens if the properties don't generate income? What happens if tenants don't pay? What happens if there are major repairs needed? You're being so pessimistic, Mom said, her disappointment evident. This is what families do, Sarah. They invest in each other. They take calculated risks for mutual benefit. Calculated risks with my money and my credit. The room erupted in defensive arguments. They had worked so hard on this plan. They had spent weeks researching and planning. The advisor had assured them it was a sound investment. I was being selfish and short-sighted. I was letting fear hold back the entire family's financial future. But underneath their arguments, I heard something that chilled me: entitlement. They weren't asking for my help. They weren't presenting an opportunity for my consideration. They were informing me of decisions they had made, using my financial life as their foundation. They had assumed my compliance so completely that they had made irreversible commitments on my behalf. I thought about all the years of sacrifice, all the times I had said yes when I wanted to say no, all the dreams I had deferred, and opportunities I had passed up to fund their wants and needs. I thought about Mark, who had tried to help me see what I was too blind to recognize. I thought about my coworkers who had stopped inviting me to social events because I always declined due to lack of funds. I thought about my bare apartment and my old car and my non-existent savings account. And for the first time in my life, I said the word that had been trapped in my throat for years. No. The word fell into the room like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock through my family. What? Mom asked, as if she hadn't heard correctly. No, I repeated, my voice gaining strength. I will not be signing these loan documents. I will not be investing in these properties. I will not be financing this venture. David's face flushed red. Sarah, we've already made commitments based on your participation. You can't just back out now. I never committed to participate. You assumed I would, and you made plans based on that assumption. That's not my problem. Emma started crying, her usual manipulation tactic. But Sarah, we're family. Families support each other. This could set us all up for life. Families support each other, I agreed. But for the past 6 years, I've been the only one doing the supporting. I've funded your lives while sacrificing my own. I've given and given and given, and what have I received in return? More requests, more demands, more assumptions that my money and my credit and my future exist solely for your benefit. That's not fair, Mom protested. We've always been grateful for your help. Grateful enough to pay me back, because I've been keeping track, and the amount you owe me could have been a down payment on my own house years ago. The room fell silent. For the first time, I had spoken the truth that everyone had been carefully avoiding. The money hadn't been gifts or loans. It had been one-way transfers that no one ever intended to repay. Money isn't everything, Sarah, Dad said quietly. Family is more important than money. Then why does every conversation we have revolve around how much money I can provide? When was the last time any of you called just to ask how I was doing? When was the last time you celebrated my achievements without immediately calculating how they could benefit you? I looked around the table at faces that were angry, hurt, defensive, and guilty. These people who I had loved unconditionally, who I had sacrificed everything for, who I had believed loved me in return. But looking at them now, I realized they didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. They loved my usefulness, my reliability, my inability to say no. They had never bothered to know or love the person I actually was, underneath all the giving. I'm done, I said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I'm done funding your lives. I'm done being your emergency bank. I'm done sacrificing my future for your wants. If you walk away from this deal, you're walking away from this family, David said, his voice cold and threatening. I looked at him for a long moment, this brother I had idolized and supported and enabled for so many years. Then I guess I'm walking away from this family. I turned and left the house, leaving behind the loan documents and the shocked faces, and the years of conditioning that had taught me my worth was measured by my willingness to give everything away. I drove back to Chicago in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my heart pounding with the magnitude of what I had done. The aftermath was brutal. My phone rang constantly for days, cycling through guilt trips, angry accusations, and finally, threats about the legal and financial commitments they claimed I had made. I changed my number. They showed up at my apartment, and I refused to answer the door. They contacted my work, and I had to explain to HR that family members were harassing me. Each boundary I set was met with escalation, as if they couldn't comprehend that their ATM had developed free will. The guilt was overwhelming. I had been conditioned for so long to prioritize their needs over my own that saying no felt like a betrayal of everything I had been taught about love and loyalty. I lay awake at night wondering if I was making a terrible mistake, if I was destroying the only relationships that mattered, if I was as selfish and ungrateful as they claimed. But something else was happening too. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I could look at my bank account without feeling sick. I could make plans for my future without calculating how much I needed to reserve for family emergencies. I could consider taking the New York position without worrying about being too far away to solve everyone's problems. I started seeing a therapist, Rebecca Chen, who specialized in family dysfunction and codependency. The first few sessions were devastating, as she helped me recognize the patterns that had defined my entire adult life. I learned words like financial abuse and emotional manipulation. I learned that love shouldn't require the complete sacrifice of self. I learned that saying no didn't make me a bad person. Dr. Chen helped me understand that my family had created a system where my worth was tied entirely to my utility. They had trained me from childhood to believe that love was conditional on my ability to meet their needs. They had systematically discouraged any behavior that prioritized my own well-being, because a Sarah who put herself first was a Sarah who might not be available to fund their lives. Slowly, I began to rebuild my sense of self. I started saying yes to invitations from coworkers. I bought furniture for my apartment. I opened a savings account that no one else knew about. I researched the New York position and realized how much I wanted it, how excited I was about the opportunity to start fresh in a new city where I could be the person I chose to be, not the person my family needed me to be. 3 months after the confrontation, I accepted the transfer to New York. I didn't tell my family about the move until after I had signed the lease on a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. The response was predictable. Hurt feelings, accusations of abandonment, attempts to guilt me into changing my mind. But the manipulation felt different now. I could see it for what it was, instead of absorbing it as truth. Moving to New York was like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into bright sunlight. Everything felt new and full of possibility. I threw myself into my work with an energy I didn't know I possessed. I joined a hiking group and discovered a love for outdoor adventure. I took cooking classes and learned to make meals that weren't ramen noodles. I went on dates without worrying about family emergencies interrupting romantic dinners. 6 months after the move, I met James at a coffee shop near my office. He was reading the same book I had just finished, and we struck up a conversation about the author's other works. He was a software developer with kind eyes and an easy laugh. When he asked me out, I said yes, without calculating whether I could afford dinner at a restaurant. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally. James was curious about my life, my thoughts, my dreams. He listened when I talked about my work and celebrated my achievements without immediately thinking about how they could benefit him. When I finally told him about my family situation, he didn't try to fix it or tell me what to do. He just held my hand and said he was proud of me for choosing myself. For the first time, I understood what a healthy relationship felt like. There was give and take, mutual support, genuine interest in each other's well-being. When James needed help moving apartments, I was happy to spend my Saturday carrying boxes. When I had the flu, he brought me soup and medicine without keeping score. We planned a vacation together and split the costs evenly because we both wanted to go and both could afford it. The contrast with my family's dynamic was stark and painful. I grieved for the relationships I had thought we had, the love I had believed was real, but I also felt a growing sense of self-respect and authentic happiness that I had never experienced before. A year after moving to New York, I was promoted again, this time to account director. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and stock options. When I called my parents to share the news, they asked immediately about my new financial capacity and began pitching the same property investment scheme that had been our breaking point. I hung up on them. That evening, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by furniture I had chosen and books I had bought and photographs from trips I had taken with friends. I looked at my bank account, healthy for the first time in my adult life. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, so desperate for approval that she would have bankrupted herself for the illusion of love. James found me there, contemplating the distance I had traveled. "Are you okay?" he asked, settling beside me on the couch I had bought with my own money. I think I am, I said, realizing as I said it that it was true. For the first time in my life, I think I actually am. 2 weeks later, Emma called. It was the first contact from my family in months. She was crying, explaining that the property investment had failed spectacularly. They had lost their deposits, defaulted on the loans they had managed to secure without me, and were facing financial ruin. She wanted me to come home and help them figure out how to rebuild. The old Sarah would have been on the next plane to Chicago with her checkbook open. The new Sarah listened to her sister's sob story with compassion, but without the desperate need to fix everything. When Emma finished her tale of woe and asked when I could come home to help, I gave her the answer she didn't want to hear. I'm sorry you're going through this, Emma, but I can't help you. You'll need to figure this out on your own. The response was immediate and vicious. I was selfish, heartless, ungrateful. I had abandoned my family in their time of need. I was dead to them if I wouldn't come home and make things right. I hung up and felt nothing but relief. The manipulation that had once sent me into spirals of guilt and self-doubt bounced off me like rain off an umbrella. I had learned to recognize it for what it was, and I had learned that I didn't have to absorb their emotions as my own. That weekend, James and I went hiking in the Catskills. As we stood on a mountain overlook, looking out at the vast landscape spread below us, I felt a sense of peace and possibility that I had never imagined was available to me. I had spent so many years believing that my value was tied to my willingness to sacrifice everything for others. I had believed that love required the complete negation of self. But standing there with James's hand in mine and my own dreams finally taking shape, I understood that real love, love worth having, didn't require me to disappear. Real love celebrated my successes without calculating their utility. Real love wanted me to be happy and fulfilled and whole. 3 months later, I started my own consulting firm, using the savings I had been able to accumulate for the first time in my adult life. James was my first employee, handling the technical side while I focused on client relationships. We were partners in every sense of the word, building something together based on mutual respect and shared goals. On the first anniversary of my move to New York, I received a card from my parents. It was a generic thinking of you card with a short note inside. We love you and miss you. We hope you'll come home soon. There was no acknowledgement of what had happened, no apology for years of financial abuse, no recognition of the growth and happiness I had found. Just the same expectation that I would eventually come to my senses and return to my role as the family ATM. I threw the card away and took myself out to dinner at an expensive restaurant I had been wanting to try. I ordered champagne and the most expensive item on the menu, and I savored every bite while making plans for the future I was building for myself. 2 years later, James and I got married in a small ceremony in Central Park. My family wasn't invited, not out of spite, but because I wanted to be surrounded only by people who genuinely loved and supported me. My coworkers came, and my hiking group friends, and Dr. Chen, who had helped me find my way back to myself. It was a celebration of love that didn't require sacrifice, commitment that didn't demand the erasure of self. As I danced with my husband under the string lights we had hung in our favorite restaurant, I thought about the woman I had been and the woman I had become. I had lost a family, but I had gained myself. I had given up the illusion of unconditional love based on unconditional giving, but I had found genuine love that celebrated my wholeness. The girl who had believed her worth was measured by her willingness to give everything away was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that the most radical act of love was learning to value herself enough to demand the same from others. I had broken free from the prison of people-pleasing and financial martyrdom, and I had discovered that life on the other side was more beautiful than I had ever dared to imagine. Sometimes I wonder if my family ever understood what they lost when they drove me away. Sometimes I wonder if they ever recognized that their greed and entitlement cost them a daughter and sister who would have loved them forever if they had simply learned to love her back. But mostly, I don't think about them at all. I'm too busy living the life I was always meant to have, surrounded by people who see my value beyond my bank account, building dreams that belong entirely to me. The future stretches ahead, bright with possibility and free from the weight of others' expectations. I am enough, exactly as I am, without apology or explanation. And for the first time in my life, that feels like more than enough. It feels like everything.